Hi, this is Reg Athwal, and welcome to our channel for another episode for family business experts. Got a fantastic guest with us today who's going to be giving us their insights, ideas, wisdom, and he'll tell us also a bit about his family business. So hopefully it'll inspire you, but let me give you a formal introduction for our guest, and that is Mr. Paul McGee from the UK. He has published 11 books. We were just chatting before we started recording today, 11 books, a 12th one coming out later on this year, and already the 13th in the pipeline. Absolutely amazing. Paul is one of not just Europe, it used to be Europe, but now he's a global leading speaker on the subject of change, workplace relationships, and motivation. His book, SUMO, as you can see there on the slide, SUMO, became a Sunday Times bestseller, and his book, Self-Confidence, reached #1 in WHSmith's business book chart. And for those of you from international shores, WHSmith is a big brand in the UK, and he remained there for 24 weeks. He's also appeared on the BBC breakfast television shows and is a regular contributor to BBC Radio. And really, what I love about Paul is he keeps things simple, practical, relevant. What he says is what you could say in 50 words, you can say in maybe 5. And I love that about Paul. He's also inspirational. He's funny. He's worked with over 1,000 organizations now in 40 countries today, from India to Italy to Bangkok to Brisbane. I laugh about it on social media, but he stayed at the best hotels in the world, including the Premier Inn. Okay, and well, I'll be asking him about that one later. On that note, I think it's best that I don't take up any more time for the introduction, and let's hear from Paul directly. Hi, Paul. How are you doing?
Great. I'm great, Reg. And what an introduction. I'll tell you, I feel the pressure already to live up to it. But seriously.
So have you sold your shares in Premier Inn, or do you still have them?
Yeah, well, people often say about this, and they don't seem to do, you know, you can obviously fly in all these airlines and you become a platinum member in the business lounge. I get absolutely zero from the Premier Inn, but you always know what you're going to get, or you did do until the middle of March this year. But I look forward to hopefully being reunited with them sometime maybe later this year, hopefully.
So Paul, thanks for sharing that. And that it's a private joke, and for viewers out there, you know, it's only because Paul has traveled the world, and occasionally we see a repetition where he has stayed in the Premier, and we laugh about this, but so you should buy shares. But on a separate note, 15 or so, 20 years ago, I think you published around 2015, was it, Paul?
I published SUMO, came out in 2005, and the 10th anniversary edition came out in 2015.
The second. So when you first published that book, how did you end up with this title, SUMO? And it is very simple. I mean, what's behind this name? Yes. How did you come up with this?
Well, everything for me has been evolution, including my my family business. I wasn't at school thinking, you know, when I grow up, I want to be a motivational speaker and develop something called the SUMO brand and start a family business. That was not on my radar. I wanted to be an actor or a journalist. I ended up in the flipping bank, which was an interesting experience. Anyway, fast forward a few years, working as a graduate management trainee for Unilever, specialising in HR, but I become ill with an illness called ME, myalgic encephalomyelitis, yucky flu, or chronic fatigue syndrome. You're not familiar with it, anyone. It's the equivalent of going to bed at night with your mobile phone with no charge whatsoever. Right. You charge it up all night, and when you wake up in the morning, it's on 5%. Mm-hmm. From an energy point of view, that's how it was for me, almost for 3 years. After 3 years, I thought, you know what? I'm on 20%. I reckon I could get myself a little part-time job. I couldn't get anything because no one had hired me because I couldn't pass a medical. So it was actually 29 years ago I hired myself. I was amazing at the interview, standout candidate. And since then, written a few books, spoken in a few countries. I work with the 3 Ps, the private sector, the public sector, and I work with some Premier League football teams, predominantly Manchester City, I've been involved with for nearly 10 years. But during lockdown, I actually did an event for Brighton and Hove Albion Football Club. In 2002, I come across this phrase, SUMO. It's an acronym. It stands for Shut Up, Move On. Some people love that phrase, and some people go, well, I think that sounds rather aggressive. It's not meant to be aggressive, but the shut up bit is in many ways take time out, stop, think, reflect, press pause. Is it a provocative statement? Yeah. Does it get people's attention? Absolutely. Wasn't meant to be aggressive, though. You could argue that globally we've had a huge shut up moment. The question is, how are we going to move on
So would you say there is, it's not just the statement, but it's how it's said. So there could be a shut up, move on, or it could be shut up, move on.
Yeah, and in some ways the tone of it, I mean, sometimes I say you need to shut up that, to shut up moaning about stuff we can't do anything about. And it's like the equivalent of going into McDonald's and going, oh, can I have the lobster thermidor? Yeah, it'd be nice to have, but it ain't on the menu. And I find a lot of people moan about stuff that ain't on the menu. So how about shut up some of that moaning and move on and think, well, what is in the menu, or what could we now create as a new menu?
So let's deep dive, Paul, into some of the things in this best-selling book that has sold, hundreds of thousands of copies, I'm sure, around the world now. I want to take a couple of things from the book, if that's okay with your permission, and ask you.
Sure.
So you've got something in the book around change a T-shirt. Okay, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's always Frankie Goes to Hollywood. They were a group, a band from Liverpool in the early 80s, and they sang several songs, and one of them was banned for various reasons. And they started going around these T-shirts that said, Frankie Says Relax, which was the title of the song. And I often say, imagine if what you thought about yourself was a phrase on a T-shirt and you wore that T-shirt every day. Now, for some people, the message on your T-shirt may be, I'm totally mad, M-A-D, making a difference. Here's a phrase that I think is very powerful and profound. Change is possible. But I think there are some people, and in life, it's like they wear this T-shirt, not just be able to see this, and it's got the word victim on it.
Yeah.
Now, I'm always keen to stress there are genuine victims in life. I get that. Of course there are. I've worked with them in a lot of the roles that I've done. But the thing is, I think sometimes it's like we become a bit of a martyr, play this game, what I call the BSE game, blame someone else. And clearly in the UK at the moment, lots of people can spend a lot of their energy and focus blaming the government or blaming other institutions for where we find ourselves in life. Reality is, I'm sure people are to be challenged and to be blamed, but that doesn't actually ultimately serve us. I need to change my victim T-shirt. And I think one of the key things I've learned in life is the importance of taking personal responsibility. I ran away from home at the age of 10 because of a psychologically very abusive stepfather. And I could look back on my childhood and things that happened before then and after then. And if I want, I can feel justified wearing that victim T-shirt. It does me ultimately no good. You've got to work through certain things. And ultimately, I don't want to say as a 55-year-old, well, my life would have been great if I hadn't had a difficult childhood.
Can I ask you, Paul, when we're working with entrepreneurs, family businesses around the world, we talk about legacies going from one generation to the next. We also talk about underlying issues and blockages that families have. And we've got our own list from A to J, and you've already touched on that briefly with the T-shirt. So I really get that. It's a simple concept, but I get it. Where people are walking around, that's what you're saying, and we refer to anger, blame, confusion. The list goes on all the way to J, which is jealousy. But people walking around with almost with this underlying issue, and it's like a magnet. They're attracting more of it, aren't they? Does that make sense with that concept?
Life can become very much a self-fulfilling prophecy, can't it? Because you try something here, well, I've never had any luck and this always happens to me. It's about failed relationships, failed businesses. And so, yes, I think the way we think affects how you feel, how you behave, and therefore the results you get in life. And so I would say this, a change of identity can lead to a change in behavior. And I wore that yellow T-shirt. I was the victim. I was the martyr. And guess what? It was not adding value to my life. And it was time to cancel the pity party, take a bit of personal responsibility. And a formula I have in the SUMO book is E plus R equals O. It's the event plus how we respond that influences the outcome. And Reg, you'll love this. SUMO is an acronym we know can stand for shut up, move on. It can also, when working in education, stand for stop, understand, move on. But SUMO as a word in Latin means to choose. And for me, every single day, we get to choose how we live that day, how we choose to think, how we choose to behave. And our choices have consequences.
So this ERO, when I was doing some research, Paul, for our interview as well, and I went on to Google, this comes up everywhere with your brand. Is this a key part of the book? You know, the event, response, is that right? And then outcome.
And then outcome, yeah. And what's interesting, Reg, is it wasn't my original idea, but it's one that I built upon. I actually heard it in 1992. I'm driving in my little Ford Fiesta, and I'm listening to an audio cassette, which dates how long it was. And Jack Canfield, who people might know because he became one of the co-authors of Chicken Soup for the Soul, he almost mentioned this in this audio program, but he mentioned it about, I don't know, 10, 15 seconds. I almost swerved my car to the side of the road, and I'm like, oh my days, because I realized up until that point, I'd lived by a different formula. My formula was E equals O. In other words, if that's the event, you know what the outcome's going to be. And so that planted a seed in me. And I have to say, I talk about it far more than Jack Canfield ever did. And I've developed it on so many different levels. But
so how do you feel, Paul, that could be relevant? How do you feel that's relevant today, 2020 crisis, all the things that are going on? How do you use that formula now?
Okay,
in the present?
on two different levels. First of all is, okay, we've had a pandemic, an event, which has now created a series of other events. But two family businesses, two families, two organizations, two airlines can have the same events, but trust me, they could actually still end up with different outcomes, not because of the event, because of how they have chosen to respond. The other thing I'm finding a lot, Reg, is a lot of people are talking about anxiety and about the future. But what they're doing there, understandably, and I appreciate it, is they're getting to a point of the event is just an imagined event. It's a negative imagined event about the future. Psychologists call it anticipatory stress. And so that anticipatory stress, that imagined event, is causing a reaction or response in us now that isn't creating a great outcome. So it's fundamentally a really important formula to what we're dealing with right now.
So when you talk about in your book, Hippo time is okay, is that relevant in what's happening in the world right now?
It's a good spot. I mean, I have several SUMO principles, but people kind of go, Hippo time? And the point, I suppose, that marks me out as a little bit different to some motivational speakers is I'm not saying, come on, let's keep a happy face all the time. What do hippos do in mud? They wallow. They go out into the mud or the water to get out of the heat and to cool down. The mud on their skin actually heals their skin from the effects of the sun. The point I'm trying to make is as human beings, we're not machines. We at times need to just give ourselves a bit of permission to wallow. It's okay to not always feel okay, to feel mad, bad, or sad. It's legit. It's part of being a human. However, one of my other points about hippo time is it's okay, but it's temporary. It's part of your journey. It's not meant to be your destination. And people watching this and listening to this, you may have had a big challenge in your own business. And I'm not saying, oh, ignore it, just pretend to be happy and positive. You need to process your disappointment, digest it, sit with your sadness. But then you need to kind of go process it and acknowledge it. But then there needs to be, okay, this is not where we're going to stay, though, wallowing in the mud. This is not bring all your hippo buddies who drag you further down, because the mud can get pretty warm and pretty comfortable. We need to keep a vision for what the future's going to look like and go, hey, part of the journey is having hippo time. But trust me, this is not our destination.
Is this why, Paul, when you published this book, is this why it became a bestseller? And, every time I travel to the UK, or I travel out, I should say, and I'm at Heathrow Airport, and I always go into the bookshop to see what book I should be buying. Your books are always there, okay? Sumo's always there on the shelf. And it's a bit like, for me, like the book, Who Moved My Cheese, okay? Simple concepts work, don't they?
They do, yeah, they do. I mean, let's be honest. My mum travels around airports all around the country, putting my books everywhere. Let's be honest. It's a family business, and she's on commission. It is. I mean, let's be honest. Also, Who Moved My Cheese is sold in the millions. Mine sold, I don't know, maybe up to a couple of 100,000. So I'm not complaining, but I think a bit like Who Moved My Cheese, although mine's got us maybe a bit more to it. It's not a fable or a parable. But I think people like simplicity. The amount of people who buy a book is very different to the amount of people who then read the book until the end. So some people go, oh yeah, this book sold 7 million copies. But how many of those people who bought it read it from beginning to end? I think the vast majority of people who buy Sumo and start reading it, finish it. And I think one of the reasons is it's not this heavyweight tome you've got to spend the next 3 to 6 months wading through. Yeah. It's easy, it's accessible, it's simple. And also, I include a number of my own personal family stories in the book. And I think that's something that connects us, whichever culture we're in. I talk about challenges with my wife and with my kids, maybe the odd success story as well along the way. And I think it's that being authentic, being a bit vulnerable and transparent, and bringing in something, because I haven't won an Olympic gold medal. I haven't climbed to the top of Everest. But I do try and do. Not recently. Although I've got the afternoon free, Reg. So if I can get a flight, I'll be there. But I talk about family and relationships, and I just think that is something universally people can relate to.
Yeah, and I think you're echoing also an interview I did recently for viewers. You could go onto the channel and find it. It's was with Mark Sanborn in the US, the author of The Fred Factor. And he was saying the same thing. It wasn't a fable. It was a real story about Fred. And he said an 8-year-old needs to be able to understand this story. And that's why it sold millions of copies. And, going into the book again, I want to try grab as many little tips from you today for our viewers. You've got Remember the Beach Ball. What's that about?
This is just, so again, incredibly simple, but I think very profound. And here's one I blew up earlier. So I have this beach ball. And when you're looking at it, and if for some reason you're able to access this by audio, you're looking at a beach ball at the moment, and you're seeing 3 colours, red, yellow, and orange. I'm looking at the same beach ball as you, but from my perspective, it's blue, white, and green. So sometimes family members, other colleagues, your clients, your customers, your friends can be looking at the same situation as you, but we might automatically assume if I'm seeing it as blue, white, and green, you're probably seeing it as very similar to me. And it's like, no, maybe they're not. And I think sometimes when people see things differently from each other, and we're getting this very much in the polarization of politics and identity politics and everything that's going out there, there's this sense of, if you see things differently from me, one of us has to be wrong, and it's not me. And part of what I want to think about is, like with my wife, who is wired. I mean, if you can think about someone who's wired, could be the complete opposite of me, then that's my wife. She is wired from a flipping different planet, I can tell you. But she sees the beach ball differently from me. What I've had to realize is, Paul, shut up thinking your perspective is the only perspective there is, and try and understand where other people are coming from. And recognize also that sometimes, we see things differently, but sometimes we could both be right. Yeah. So that's just a little bit about the beach ball.
Love
and
it.
I'm massively into having beach ball conversations with people. It's
that was better than actually reading your book. Seeing you do that live is much better. Now I know why you get booked as a keynote speaker on a frequent basis. So tell me, I mean, the book, going back to what you were saying, it's only around 130 pages. And like you said, that's excellent, because you got a chance maybe within an hour or less than an hour, you could read this entire book.
So some people actually do when they're at the airport waiting for the flight that's been delayed.
Yeah, but then your mum's there to make sure some more books.
And she's there, she sells them, you get a free kebab, you get a sandwich, it's all part of the deal.
And by the way, when Mrs. McGee is watching this, happy birthday, okay?
My wife, she's good.
Yeah. So talking about your wife for a second, okay? Don't make it too personal, but on a serious note, you are a family business. Yes. I love talking to people, husband and wife teams, or whether it's more than 2 members in a family working together. What's that been like, building a family business with your life partner, with your spouse? What works well? What are some of the challenges? what tips
Sure.
could you give to the viewers who could be in the same situation or thinking about going into business with their other half?
Yeah, well, you could go, don't do it. Just don't do it if you want to save your relationship. But I do think we need to be mindful of working with each other. I mean, for me, as I say, I only started my own business because no one would give me a job. So it wasn't this vision. I wasn't an entrepreneur. I suppose that's developed and evolved, but it didn't start like that. And my wife, I'm a social scientist. She's a biologist. And so, as I say, wired very differently to me. And she worked in a hospital, and then she'd do a little bit of part-time work in the business. But as the business grew, she got more and more involved. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that I value massively about her is very much, she's got a much more stable personality than me. I'm a bit more up and down emotionally. So my highs are higher, my lows can be lower. I think Helen is much more an equilibrium about her sort of like personality. Also, she's far more analytical than me. So I get excited. Hey, I've got this idea. And I'm thinking blue, white, and green, blue, white, and green. That's my side of the beach ball. That's all the colours there are. And then my wife's going, yeah, but what about red, yellow, and orange? And if I'm honest, at times, her challenge of my ideas, which ultimately adds so much value and depth and insight, because my ideas become much more formulated and matured and have some greater value. But I'll be honest with you, Reg, when she first says things from her stand of the beach ball, in the early days, I just thought she's been negative. And that's how, and I'm thinking, where's your enthusiasm for my idea? You're just being negative, and that could cause conflict. What I've had to stop and understand is, one, she's just got she's wired differently. She sees the world differently from me. She has a diversity of opinion and perspective, which is absolutely crucial to my business going forward. But initially, it's hard. My daughter is wired a bit more like me. If I run a couple of chapters past my daughter, she's almost like dancing around the room going, this is amazing, this is amazing. I love it, Dad. I love it, Dad. My wife's going, that's interesting. And I'm like, come on, Helen, feed my ego. Tell me how amazing it is. But you know what? If my wife was like me, our business would not be as good as it is. Yeah. Because I need someone who sees the world differently, who's wired differently. Does that add value? Yes. But does it also come with some challenges along the way? Got to be honest, of course it does.
Yeah, that's great. Really, really good insights there. So in order to understand each other, those opposites, like we call it, we've got it in our book that we published, which is your DNA profile. I used to laugh about this with my wife years ago because, I say this in a humorous way, not in a serious way. I used to call her the dream killer. And the only reason, and not because she was, negative, it was because every time I'd come up with the idea, I'm good to go, she'll go, but where's the detailed plan?
Yes.
I'm like, what do you mean? I said, the world needs this. I'm good to go, right? Everything's already in there. I'm done. I've even got to the finish line in my head.
Yeah.
No. Where's all the details? And so, I got to a point where when I first started as an entrepreneur and used to bounce things past her, I'd be like, there's no point discussing it with her because she'll just kill it off. But in reality, having lost millions and millions of dollars in my entrepreneurial career, the partnership is all about, I will make the money, but I won't touch it afterwards. So she's the one who handles the money. She decides what happens next. She's the one who'll give me a little bit back to go and experiment with my next crazy idea. So I think, I really get what you were saying, Paul, but to bring this back to you is, how do you discover that? What should you do to find out those traits and those opposite areas to make the partnership work? Because otherwise you could end up with a lot of arguments. Someone could even get divorced off the back of this.
I'm sure they have done. I think there's several, if you think sort of like behaviors, characteristics, even values. I think one thing to be aware of as an entrepreneur, and as a leader, you can be so focused on the future. one of the things is self-awareness is massively important. And I think because of the kind of topics I talk about, and I wrote another book called How to Succeed with People. My wife said to me recently, you should read that sometime. But I think I go for that sense of, I try and think, okay, from my side of the beach ball, I see myself as a blue, white and green, but it's good to see how other people see me. So self-awareness. And I think another invaluable trait is humility. Keep that sense of being open-minded, be willing to be wrong, be willing to be challenged, be willing to keep on learning, growing, discovering, keep your curiosity. And I think through things like different personality styles models, I talk about in the Sumo book, cheerleader, commander, carer, and thinker. And by nature, I'm more of a commander, cheerleader. My wife is more of a thinker, carer. And just that as a, and it's only a very simplified model. I don't want to get too scientific about it. It's food for thought, but it raises your awareness. And I think having that humility to know, all right, Paul, you might be on stage, mate, and you might be the one that's signing the books for people and getting the acclaim and the applause. But you know what? If things weren't running well in the office, if the logistics weren't right, if you weren't running your ideas by other people who see things differently, you wouldn't be on stage. So it is definitely a recognition. We are a team and we're in this together.
Yeah, and you've just mentioned a key word for me there, recognition, because I think, I was talking to a friend about this recently where, okay, on one side, whether it's your model, my model, there's DISC out there, Myers-Briggs, Belbin, SHL. I recommend go and do some of these things, because if you can understand each other better, that's a good start. But the second part, what you just said, is that you're on stage, Helen's behind you making that work. But if there isn't recognition and appreciation for that, that can also kill off relationships,
I think one of the things I've learned in life generally, and a little insight I came out with recently, was my clients, in the past, I'd say my clients got the best of me, but my family got the dregs of me. They got the kind of like the leftovers in terms of energy. And I've had to really sort of like readdress that over the years. And the other thing I think about is this. I mean, I've now spoken in 41 countries, including places like India and Dubai as well. And one of the things I've never come across anybody who said the following, my trouble, I've had too much encouragement. And I'm a great believer in let's encourage people. But sometimes it's like I'm so busy trying to encourage people out there that I sometimes need to go, but what about my own inner world? What about my team? Because I've got other people who work in my business. I've got some associates as well. What am I doing to cheer on the people closest to me? Because sometimes we can be so outward focused. We almost like can take, if we're not careful, our family for granted. And we all need the oxygen of encouragement at times. We really do.
Yeah, hang on. And it's something that we talk about in our family forums, where we say to people, who's the one person right now that you're neglecting in your family?
Yeah.
And everyone has one. Yeah,
and you know what? Sometimes actually, it could actually be the person you're neglecting could be yourself.
Wow, yeah.
Because you're so busy. Yeah, I'll support the family, and I've got 2 elderly parents. They don't live with each other, so I'm having to help them. I've got my 2 kids living with us at the moment with their partners, obviously my wife. And also I'm getting people who are saying, I love your videos and I love following you on social media, and can you do this, can you do that? It's like, whoa. Yeah, I want to be the hero for the world. And sometimes you need to resign from being general manager of the universe. And when I was ill with COVID-19, guess what? The earth kept on spinning. It's like, actually, Paul, sometimes you've got to take a bit of time out. So for me, sometimes the person you can neglect is actually yourself and your own well-being and your own self-care. Is crucial. I always say self-care isn't selfish, it's crucial to your success and your sanity.
Words of wisdom there, Paul. And on a more sensitive note there, you went through the coronavirus. I mean, I don't know many people who have. You're one of the few I know, but what was it like? Just briefly, what's that feeling of this?
Yeah, I suppose initially I was in denial. There wasn't hardly anyone, it seemed, in my whole flipping town in Warrington in the northwest of England who had it. My son was living with us at the time. I became unwell. I didn't think it was a virus, maybe, but I didn't think it was COVID-19. And then based on all the symptoms, we became aware, actually, it probably was. I got an incredibly high fever, and I would be delirious during the night, which wasn't a great experience, which is a good strategic decision by my wife to sleep in a different bedroom, which was also good because I experienced something I'd never experienced before, which was night sweats. Oh my days.
Really?
It was like, you got to like change the sheets on a daily basis. I mean, it got that bad. I was thinking of having a shower at least twice a week at the one stage, Reg, I'll tell you. It was that dramatic. But I would literally wake up in the morning and it was like I'd had a bath in the middle of the night but not got dried. And so the delirium was weird, the fatigue, the fever. But the great thing was, for me personally, is it never affected my breathing, which is quite surprising because my son said, you know, it hit you hard in terms of the virus compared to how it affects a number of people. But he would say, well, lucky, good fortune, I don't know, no underlying health conditions. But so I kept on taking these deep breaths on a daily basis. And I thought, if I can keep on doing that, and it hasn't got to my chest, I was never scared of, will I need to be hospitalized and go on a ventilator? The only scary bit, if I'm honest, was, hang on, will this re-trigger my ME, my chronic fatigue syndrome? And if I could just share one personal story very briefly. Where we are having this interview now in this office, I would still try every day, maybe just for 15 minutes, to do editing on a book that comes out later this year. And one day I came down to my office and I was obviously unwell and low in energy. And I thought, you know what, Paul, you're 55, you've had a good life, you've had a good run. You know, maybe this is the end of the business. And in my head, I kind of went, I don't know if I've got the fight for the future. You know, I've navigated my business through the financial crisis of 2008. I navigated my business through some negative publicity from a national daily newspaper in 2010. And I thought, have I really got the fight for the future now to go through something else when I make my living out of speaking at live events in front of lots of people? And it was almost like an inner voice said to me, you don't need a fight for the future. You just need to have the fight for today. And I think that's a really important message because we don't know exactly how the future is going to unfold, but let's not be so fixed on the future and anxious about it that we ignore that we still have the gift of today, of now, and what am I going to do today that's going to prepare me for a better tomorrow? So fortunately, after just over 2 weeks, I became well again, fortunately, and rediscovered my mojo.
Well, I'm glad you're laughing about it now, but when you were going through it, was there ever, I know you talked about your physical state, but when it comes to your mental state, was there ever at any point thoughts around this thing could get me, I could die? I may not be here in a week's time, 2 weeks' time.
No, there wasn't, to put it bluntly, there wasn't on that, but there was just this, have I got the fight?
Right.
Have I got the energy psychologically? Because at the end of the day, people hire me for hopefully my insights, the way I make sometimes the complex, simple and accessible. But also I try and use my humor. I try and bring my energy. And on that analogy we used earlier on about the phone and the mobile charge, I was down to 2%. And I'm thinking 2% is not a lot to have the energy to carry on this business and to be all the things I normally am. But I had to just take a bit of time out, let the body do what it needed to do. And, fortunately, I'm back in the groove. But no, I was never fearful of death, but I was fearful of my chronic fatigue syndrome returning. And I was also fearful of, have I really got enough within me, enough fight within me to kind of like rebuild my business? Unfortunately, I found I have.
So maybe, Paul, linking that for a second, because I think this is powerful what you're sharing. Two things I'd like to get your thoughts on is you mentioned fear a couple of times, okay?
Yeah.
And in one of your best-selling books around self-confidence, you talk about why self-confidence is the X factor and taking the con out of confidence. So could you give us your thoughts around fear, this disease fear, and self-confidence? Is there a link with these two things in any way? Give us your thoughts around.
Yeah, I think that the thing that's interesting for me, very much so, Reg, is that I think fear, we owe our very existence and our survival as a species to fear. So when people go around with these big T-shirts and go, no fear, my focus is, well, hang on a minute, we owe our very existence to fear at times. Fear can alert us to some potential challenges and some potential threats. So we kind of like need to be aware of that, but we also need to realize that fear can absolutely overwhelm us. And sometimes we just need to have the confidence and the courage to recognize that bravery is not the absence of fear, but it's recognizing I do have a degree of fear here, but I need to step out of my comfort zone with some courage to try and have a go at things. The other point I'd say, though, that's really crucial about confidence, it is the X factor. But I say if you're building a wall, your competence, your skills, your knowledge is the bricks. And the actual mortar that keeps the bricks together is your confidence. And I think what part of the take the con out of confidence is recognizing, yes, we need it, but we also need to be competent. We need to be knowledgeable. We need to be skilled. When you put competence and confidence together, boy, can you build something really powerful and very special.
I know you're working, Paul, on your next book, which is going to link some of these elements for youngsters, for children. If someone's got low self-confidence, and I think I remember in your main book there, I think there was one chapter, I'm just looking at it again, was around, who crushed your confidence during your upbringing. I think that's that's powerful. Yeah. Could you expand on that? How is that linking with the new book that you're working on for children?
Okay, so I think when we're growing up as children, if you hear something regularly enough, because there's a point in your life where your family, your parents, whoever's bringing you up, they are your gods. You take your cues in terms of who you are as a person, your self-worth, your identity, your esteem, your value from your parents, which is why hopefully most of us want to help, our children to flourish. But, I go back to my stepfather. It was very little physical abuse, to be fair, but the amount of psychological abuse was appalling and off the charts in many respects. And so one of the things that as I eventually got to take my T-shirt off and got older and learned some stuff and learned some strategies to help me overcome some of those challenges, is why I developed Sumo for Schools. And we have a website, sumo4schools.com, and with the number 4 being the 4 in it.
Make sure that's in the description area for the viewers as well, okay? Yeah.
Great. But I've been passionate about, I had to go through a lot of difficult stuff. And was still in my 30s and 40s learning things. But I suppose I had a passion that was, why do you have to wait to your 30s or your 40s to learn this stuff? How can we make some of these ideas that I've been making accessible for adults, accessible for young people? And so I've got this book that comes out in October in the UK, and hopefully then it'll be available around the world. It's called Yes, YESSS, with a subtitle, The Sumo Secrets to Being a Positive, Confident Teenager. And I realized that if we go do life as a child with a victim T-shirt, or also feeling, well, if something doesn't go well for me, I must give up, I must quit. One of my little phrases in the book is, don't quit too quick. So there's a lot about resilience. There's a lot about bringing the beach ball. I talk about one of the chapters is called Hippos Do It and So Should You. It's all about acknowledging those feelings, processing them, but also really realizing that feelings can fade. Don't believe everything you think, because I'll tell you, I learned some stuff as a kid that I would think about myself and my identity that was not helpful to help me flourish and deal well with life. So I wanted to do, I suppose, partly based on my own childhood, based on all the feedback I got from basically the adult audiences, if you like, that I work with. How can we do something that's really fun, creative, engaging, and almost magical, if you like, for the children? And the magic doesn't come simply from the words I use, but the illustrator we've got working with us. It's a full colour book. There are some magnificent illustrations. I just think if a child opens one page, they'll be struck by it at an emotional level, and hopefully they'll get words. And I've got this little phrase, words change worlds. Words can change worlds. And I really hope genuinely some of the words that those young people read, maybe their parents and their carers, will ultimately change their worlds for the good.
Well, I'm looking forward to that book, and definitely we'll share it with a lot of our clients.
Thank you.
Teenagers. If one has a teenager who's got low self-confidence right now, can you give some just basic tips on where should one start as a parent?
Sure. I think
build that confidence.
Yeah, let's be fair. If we're not careful, what is happening in a teenager's brain as they go through adolescence is off the charts in terms of what's happening. They become much more self-conscious, much more sensitive. They don't actually want so much the approval of their parents, which they did when they were a younger child. They want it of their peers. They want to fit in. So first of all, maybe we need to think, there's a major confidence issue. What do I need to do? And if we're not careful, we magnify it into a bigger problem than it might actually be. But I think one of the things is not always about giving your children a pep talk. It's about being available, being a good listener, understanding more about their side of the beach ball. But also when, nothing motivates like success. And interestingly enough, I think, which might be counterintuitive, but when you've got low confidence, whatever your age, sometimes start by setting the bar low. Not ultra high, which is ultimately you've got to try and achieve it because constantly I'm thinking I'm going to fail, I don't achieve. But if you then get that quick win, that small win, that can boost your confidence to take the next step. And I suppose really a lot of the whole ethos of my book and the message in my book called Self-Confidence is, the remarkable truth of why a small change, can boost our confidence and build resilience. And I'm a great believer, it's good to have big visions and big goals, but don't underestimate small steps in the right direction. So one, don't magnify that maybe it's a big issue. It might not be as big an issue as you actually think, this confidence thing. But secondly, if you do think, no, there is a real issue here, go for those small wins, build some encouragement, and above all, just understand their side of the beach ball is going to probably look very, very different to yours at the moment.
Love it. Yeah. Well, thanks for that. And I think maybe when people read your books, they'll understand this in more depth. Paul, can
Absolutely.
I ask you, with your experience as a keynote speaker and as a best-selling author, with all of your experience that you've got today, if you were starting all over again as a speaker and as an author, what would you do differently? How would you start based on your experience today? Especially for someone listening right now thinking, wow, I want to be where Paul was all those years, how Reg started all those years ago. What can I learn from these guys? And they're just starting off. But based on your experience today, if you were starting all over again.
Okay, actually, if I was starting all over again, many of the, I suppose, the qualities, if you want to call it that, my focus, my desire for hard work, my passion for what I was doing, I would maintain. I think there's actually, parking my modesty to one side, I think there's a lot of things that I did then I would still repeat if I was starting now. Because there is that need for focus. There is that need to get support from other people. And I have been a very, very focused, disciplined, driven, hardworking individual. And I think to achieve success, you need all those things. But I'd also say this, when you are starting off, you are eager to get other people's opinions and their expertise, which is great. Stay hungry, stay humble. But I'd also say, be mindful that that's just their perspective. Someone once said to me, and it was the worst piece of advice I think I've ever had, along with a couple of others, was don't call yourself a motivational speaker. People hate the term. And I think in those early days, I kind of thought, well, these gurus know better than me, so I must listen to what they say. Well, be prepared to listen to what other people have to say, but weigh it up. And sometimes when you feel you need to call yourself something or do something, then maybe sometimes that's what you need to do, even if it's counterintuitive. So I listened a lot to other people, but in the early days, I thought because they're more experienced, their opinion counts more than mine. Wow, another one was, you're either a speaker or you're a trainer. You can't be both. I'm still 29 years later on from when I've signed off invalidity benefit. I am still a trainer, a coach, a speaker, an author. So sometimes it's almost remembering what to not take on board as well as what to take on board. And it's the challenge of trying to manage that, because there's many voices wanting to share their thoughts with you. And when they promote it as expertise and as facts, when what is really useful to keep on remembering is that's just actually an opinion, not a fact. So, but I wouldn't do a lot different, believe it or not, Reg.
That's really good. That's good. No, but even with what you've just said there, I think that's good advice because, at the end of the day, it's not about you, is it? The audience, your clients will come up with their own brand version for you. My parents watch a lot of my videos, so hopefully this bit, my dad will laugh a bit. But, I remember there was a scene on the platform where I mimicked my dad on stage with a bit of an Indian accent, and the whole audience absolutely cracked up. And I'm not as good as you when it comes to humor. You are brilliant with humor. And the day someone said, try jokes, and I tried jokes, I absolutely failed. I'm not someone who tells jokes on the platform, but when I was acting out a scene and just being myself and playing this character, people laughed. And then I remember someone coming up to me and saying, we want to book you for our company, fly you to, I think it was Prague at the time. And but when you do it, could you do that bit exactly like you did? Oh, what? You want me to do that scene? They were like, yeah, we need to motivate our people. That story would be great. So Paul, it's amazing, isn't it? Some of the things that we do, who cares if you end up being branded as a motivational speaker, because that's what the person wants.
I've learned to listen more to my audience than to other professional speakers. That in a nutshell. And it was actually, do you know why I started calling myself a motivational speaker? Because an audience member came up to me and actually said to me at the end, she said, my friend said I must come and hear you speak. And I was doing a session, believe it or not, on stress. But she said to me, my friend said I should come and hear you speak. She said, you're one of the best motivational speakers she's ever heard. And I'm thinking, if that's what my audience described me as, let's go with that, rather than the so-called experts who actually aren't the ones who are paying me and hiring me.
Exactly. Well, your brand from there is really, most people also refer to you as the SUMO-GUY, yeah?
That's right.
That's the main brand. And so just to wrap up, Paul, I know it's your wife's birthday today, so I'm not going to keep
you too long.
If we were to wrap up, what other tips would you like to give the viewers, whether they're entrepreneurs, business people, working in a company, next generation maybe of a family business? In closing, what could be to squeeze out some other little secrets from you and tips that could really help people?
Yeah, I think one of the things is when people say to me, how would you like to be remembered? I think if I wasn't careful, I'd be going, well, I hope people, learned a lot from my books and they got some inspiration from my conferences, and that's all good. But actually, I want to be remembered as being a good dad. I want to be remembered as being an okay husband, maybe better than an okay husband. And I need to keep reminding myself of that because I'm so passionate about my work and my message. It feels more like a vocation and a calling at times than it does a business. But I need, and I think that's always just be mindful of that. How do you want to be remembered? And to think, well, yeah, how do I want my family to remember me? Not so much my audience. The audience, in a sense, do come second when it comes to thinking about family. The other thing I think in business generally anyway, and for me as a speaker, I think if you've got a heart of service, that you want to bring value to people, whatever that looks like in the nature of your offering, and that is a constant guiding attitude that you have. How can I serve my audience? How can I serve my customer? How can I serve my colleagues? How can I serve my clients? Almost that humble servant heart where you're constantly looking to support and add value to other people in their lives, in their businesses, in their worlds, and to their children, as I'm hoping to do. I think that's just a fundamental heart attitude that will mean when you're maybe having a bit of a tough time, customers will be more loyal to you because they know how much you have cared for them and will continue to care for them. And I think relationships, more than processes and systems, are the key and the heartbeat to all that we do. They really are.
Well, yeah, that was a great 3-minute keynote speech right there. on that note, Phil, for our viewers who've lasted to the end of the episode, don't forget to go to the description area where Paul's details are there for his company, his personal brand, if you're looking to book him as a speaker virtually or in the platform once we can all travel again. And also hit the subscribe button if you enjoyed watching the video. Hit the like button. Make sure you watch some of the other episodes on the channel. We've got other great entrepreneurs and experts that we've interviewed, and come back on a regular basis. And Paul, I want to thank you once again. Keep doing what you're doing. You're an inspiration to so many of us. And I look forward to catching up with you for lunch or dinner one day in the UK or in Dubai.
That'd be wonderful. Or in Dubai. I'll cope with Dubai. Reg, it's been an absolute pleasure. It really has, and a privilege to be involved. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Paul. Take care.